if you are going to take care of the whole person, you must take care of his brain as well. And that's a critical foundation pillar at the Elphman System. The simplest thing you enjoy in life, wellness, happiness, family bonds, going to the gym each day, setting monthly PRs, enjoying your weekends, partying all night and going cruising with the guys, some ladies' night, some gossiping, some family bonds at Christmas Eve, Easter, Ramadan. All these things that everyone enjoys are non-existent for a depressed person. A depressed person may come to you and say things like, you know, Fuad, love couldn't cure me. Despite all the efforts that my friends have put in, I still feel alone, and deep inside, I'm scared a lot. Depressed people are not illusional, nor they are fragile. There are two things you must consider when it comes to depression. The first factor is genetics, and the second factor is environment. I'm not going to go into detail speaking about genetics or environment. I'm going to leave it to our own PhD clinical psychologist, Joseph Deeb, as you watch this video onward. The common thing that you will find in depressed people: fear, sense of helplessness, sense of hopelessness. And where does that lead them? Some of them will go and fetch a bottle, and bottle after bottle, it will lead to alcoholism. Some may enjoy temporary ecstatic feelings from pills. And where does that take them? You know it. Yeah, you know it. Drugs, toxicomania, and so forth. Others who have suffered from childhood abandonment, it will lead them to suicide at the extreme case, mild crimes, and violent acts. So whenever you see someone coming up to you and tell you, brother, I feel like I'm chained, I'm suffocating, I cannot breathe, my days are like falls, I keep falling into a spiral, deeper and deeper into a void, and there's no escape, and I cannot see no light. Or if you see someone withdrawing from social interaction, from family gathering, to an extent withdrawing from anything that has to do with human living, you must call for immediate professional help. Psychiatrists and psychotherapists and other talk therapists, professionals can help. And there are several symptoms, I'm gonna name 6 of them, that you need to pay attention to. You got fatigue, lack of concentration, you got decreased memory, you got decreased libido, you got overeating, obsessive overeating, and last one, you got the inability to indulge in pleasure. That's right, the inability to sense pleasure or happiness out of things. So I'm gonna repeat them. You got fatigue, you got lack of concentration, you got decreased memory, you got decreased libido, you got compulsive overeating, compulsive overeating, and last one, you got the inability to sense pleasure out of things, normal things. So whenever you see these symptoms, again, seek professional help. An untreated depressed person will, at an extreme extent, commit suicide. I'm going to allow myself to state something very important. A healthy individual can bounce back from sadness, but a depressed person cannot bounce back from sadness. A depressed person is stuck in a loop, in an ever-ending cycle of sadness. So we need to differentiate between a healthy individual that can bounce back from sadness and depressed person. Another thing is very important, that exercise has scientifically shown it has a positive impact on depressed people. Again, exercise has a positive impact, scientifically proven, on depressed people. My time in this section is done. The rest of the video is for our own Joseph Deeb. and I insist that you watch it till the end, because this is a very important issue in our modern days.
Question as the ego and its process through depression. All right. First one, sub topic is how it starts. So, for those who don't know what depression is, it's a mood disorder. It's quite common amongst other psychiatric disorders. It's actually around 19% in society. A bit, some would even go as higher. Some would actually say 25%, which means 1 in 4 persons in their lifetime will develop clinical depression. It happens between male and female. It's twice diagnosed in females, and the reason for that is due to psychosocial factors, hormonal biological factors. Females' hormones are different, and they tend to exacerbate mostly. Depression is also genetic. It runs in families, and it's the reason why suicide is also genetic, because suicide is higher in depressed cases, and if depression is genetic, that means the chances of suicide is also genetic. And there are studies to back this up. Like I said, contact me and I'll be happy to forward you some information on the topic. The idea is that some people, especially in today's modern society, they tend to throw the word depression for anything. You know, I broke up with my boyfriend or my girlfriend or whatever and I'm depressed. Yeah, okay, so I can understand that may happen. But there's a big difference between sadness and depression. Everyone who's depressed is sad, but not everyone who is sad is depressed. These symptoms I just mentioned are very serious. You know, you don't meet someone who is depressed and kind of gives you this emotion or emotional energy that you just saw yesterday. Now, don't get me wrong, now that there are some people that depression manifests in different ways and it's a bit difficult to spot. So but as far as it goes, these symptoms are noticeable to a trained eye. So how does it start? So there's always a trigger factor, more or less, and this trigger factor could be the death of a loved one, or an accident, or could be virtually anything that the individual has emotionally invested in. Now, for example, the death of a loved one, and you have all these symptoms, that's clinically normal. You're meant to mourn. It's understandable. But if these symptoms carry on for more than 6 months, then you're going to put a question mark and say, you know, something's definitely going on. Or you fail your exam and then suddenly you have suicidal tendencies, you're eating a lot, you're sleeping a lot, you cannot focus on anything, you're feeling worthless for more than 2 weeks every day. Yeah, that's good enough to actually be diagnosed with depressive disorder. So yeah, that's how it starts. It always has a trigger, and like I said, it could be anything that the individual has invested emotional energy in. And I've seen some peculiar cases. I've seen someone whose pet died, and this person for more than 1 year is just suffering from depression. Suicidal tendencies involved. He lost a lot of weight as well. Yeah, so sorry, I'm just wondering of some of bizarre cases that some people might actually be a bit shocked. But yeah, so the main point to carry out is that it starts by a trigger. What happens in the process? Okay, so like I mentioned, these symptoms, these at least 5 out of 9 will start showing, could be any 5 out of 9, but they must involve a depressed mood and loss of interest or pleasure. They must always involve these two. These are the 2 key points. If you, from my talk on depression, you have to take away these 2 points. So what happens in the process to the ego? Well, the depression, to me, the way I describe depression, in my own words, it's basically mental cancer. Yeah, you know how cancer spreads in the body. I would say the same happens in depression. It's like a dark cloud, like you see in those cartoons or whatnot. It grows inside the human mind. It eats up everything. It's very destructive. It could make the strongest people you know break down. It's just like cancer does, actually. So I always see it as a mental cancer, and the ego is affected. So all your 5 senses, like I mentioned, that's what the ego is. What you're conscious of is all affected. Your sense of pleasure is diminished, as I mentioned. Loss of interest or pleasure is the main factor in depression. The ego's sense of self, who you are, is diminished. You feel guilty. You feel sad, and I mean sad as in depressed, clinically sad, as in the sense of things that you'd find that you probably enjoy. Some people say, "Oh, he's sleeping a lot," but the sleeping a lot is it's not resting. You wake up actually tired at this point. So what happens in the process? Like I mentioned, it's like a boat going through the ocean, a stormy ocean, and you're trying your best not to capsize. Oh, it already capsized at this point, and you're just swimming in a thunderstorm, ocean crashing, and you're just trying to find your way, or you've probably given up your way to find the boat. It's very nasty. There's a storm going on into a person's mind, and if not treated, it gets worse. I'll get to that. So that's what happens in the process. It's very noticeable, and I know some people will display the symptoms differently. This is why it's important to have, a trained person, and it's always good to ask, ask a professional for help. There's nothing wrong with that as well. Third part is the loop they go through without proper treatment. Well, there's no loop. A loop is basically a cycle. It's actually a downward spiral at this point. If the longer you're depressed, the worse it gets. Those, like I mentioned, you need 5 symptoms. If you have 4, you're not depressed, but if you have 5, boom, diagnosed with depression. And the more you wait, the chances of more symptoms coming in becomes a reality. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is the suicidal ideation. There's only so much a person can think about suicide before actually attempting suicide. And suicide is very, very common in depression. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's a loop. I'd say treatment is very important, and there are two types of treatment that works best, and they work integrated. So there is the medical treatment, which are antidepressants. They play on your neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin. These that they influence your mood. So in depression, your dopamine is extremely low, and serotonin as well. Everything's low. And the antidepressant is like fuel. It makes it kickstart, restore these neurotransmitters. The second part is psychotherapy, and psychotherapy works very well. Well, it depends what type of psychotherapy. I'm not going to get into the different types for the purpose of this video and to keep it basic. But psychotherapy's job is to change the ego's perception of things. So even if I'm taking antidepressants, but I have fixated on this idea, this is wrong, and it's just going to keep on in my head and keep repeating, keep going around. That's probably the loop. That's what I would say there's a loop, is that negative thoughts just spiraling inside your head. There's only so much medication can do. So psychotherapy's job is to actually grab that loop, change their perception of it, of this problem, and do their best to make sure that they can see a different point of view, and together with the medication they can get back on track. So yeah, so just to sum up the first part, the ego and its process through depression. Part 1, how does it start? Like I said, it needs a trigger. Trigger factors are involved. It could be anything a person has emotionally invested himself in. It could be the loss of a loved one, or a pet, or anything, could even war. These are things that I find negative. It's a bit rare, let's say, if your football team loses and now you go into depression. It's a bit too much. It is possible, but highly improbable. What happens in the process? Like I mentioned, these symptoms: loss of energy, loss of pleasure, oversleeping, or not sleeping at all, loss of energy, inability to concentrate, psychomotor agitation, weight loss or weight gain. It gets worse through the process, and what they go through without treatment, like I mentioned, is a downward spiral. Things get much worse. The chances of suicide increases.